What if I told you everything you've learned about vulnerability is only half the equation? You've been taught to open up, to share, let people in, but yet nobody taught you the strategy behind how to do it. Ironically, you've mastered this at work or in your business. You know exactly when to share a strategic struggle in a meeting, for instance. You know when to share just enough humanity to influence and connect with a new client. Yet in your personal life, that same vulnerability feels terrifying. And why? Because at work, vulnerability comes with clear rules. Clear rules. You know exactly what's appropriate to share, when to share it, and how likely it will land. You've probably had training, practice, and years of feedback in the work context. But in your personal life, the rules feel murky. The stakes often feel higher. These are the people whose rejection would actually devastate you. And unlike work relationships that stay in neat professional boxes, personal vulnerability touches old wounds, family patterns, and your deepest need to be loved for who you really are. Today, I'm talking to you about smart vulnerability, the missing piece that brings the same clarity and strategy to your personal connections. But first, some tea. So if you don't know, this is part 2 of my vulnerability series. If you haven't watched part 1, which is called How Strong Women Are Being Tricked into Fake Vulnerability, I break down the patterns we need to recognize first. You can absolutely get value from this video, but if you want the complete picture, I'll link part 1 in the description and at the end as well. So smart vulnerability has 5 key elements that I'm about to share with you. It's vulnerability with strategy, self-awareness, and purpose. This is completely different from the fake vulnerability I exposed in part 1, the performative oversharing or the weaponized demands for openness. So if you're ready, let's dive into the 5 elements. So the first is establishing why exactly you want to be vulnerable. When I start working with my clients on this, why they want to be vulnerable, some of them feel that they have mastered building connection already because they've climbed the corporate ladder or they've been able to influence people in their business. They've successfully got people to work with them no matter what they're doing. But let's get clear on something, Smart with Feelings family. The emotional skills that got you promoted or got you clients are not necessarily the same as the ones that create deep relationships in your personal life. Think about it. If they were, we wouldn't see this repeated pattern of powerful, rich, and influential people dominating their professional arena or their business arena, but struggling in their personal relationships, which all culminates in divorces, estranged children, and being lonely, at the top. There's a reason we see that. Dominating professional life, struggling in personal life. How can that be? The reason is, at work, your emotional intelligence is strategic. You read the room, you manage up, and you influence people. There's always an agenda linked to some sort of financial reward or some sort of professional advancement, or it's about influencing the perception people have of you in some way. But personal relationships aren't about influencing people to perceive you in a certain way. It's actually the complete opposite. They require a different set of emotional skills. They need vulnerability and intimacy without a solely self-serving agenda. They require taking the mask off. And this can be hard when you've gotten so used to wearing this mask at work or in society. It can be incredibly daunting. And so much so you may have even forgotten what your real and bare face looks like. So before we go any further, ask yourself, why do you want to be vulnerable? What are you actually seeking? Maybe you want deeper intimacy and trust, to feel truly known by someone instead of just being admired. Maybe you're exhausted from carrying everything alone and you want relationships where support flows both ways. Maybe you've realized that your inability to be vulnerable is affecting how you show up for your children and you want to model healthier connection for them. Whatever your reason, before you continue, name it. Because vulnerability without purpose could lend itself towards an emotional chaos. But vulnerability with clear intention, that's how you build more meaningful connection. Here are 3 things to consider when defining why you want to embark on greater vulnerability in your personal life. The first thing is to incorporate an element of reciprocity in your why. For instance, if the reason you want to be more vulnerable in your personal relationships is because you don't want to feel like you're carrying the pressures of life alone anymore, perhaps you need to ensure you also incorporate being able to help people in your inner circle feel supported too. So whatever your need is, make sure you mirror fulfilling that need for other people in your inner circle. The second thing to consider in crafting this why is to ground your intention in what you can control. You can only control your openness, your effort, and your consistency, but you can't control if people judge you, if they pull away or don't reciprocate. Just focus on your why, your own actions, and not their reactions. The third thing is to ensure your why aligns with your deeper values, not your immediate needs. If you value authenticity, then your vulnerability practice should reflect that. If you value growth, you can frame your why as expanding your emotional range, for instance. So you're now clear on why you want to do this. The next thing is who. Who do you want to be vulnerable with? And when you're thinking about the who, it's really important to consider the fact that investing your emotional energy where it will create actual returns in the form of deeper connections and support is very important. Not everyone deserves or wants your vulnerability, to be quite frank. This isn't about being cold. This is about truly discerning who the right people are and trusting that if things don't go perfectly, because that's just life, they won't go perfectly all the time, but you will be okay. And that you have the communication tools and a strong enough bond with that person to address it. I share this in part 1, but the difference between healthy vulnerability and unhealthy vulnerability isn't about how much you share. Like I said in part 1, it's about choosing the right person at the right time and for the right reasons, and ensuring there's a degree of mutual nurturing or reciprocity in that. Brene Brown puts it perfectly. She says, share with those who have earned the right to hear your story. And not everyone has earned that right. Of course, it doesn't mean that they're less than you just because they haven't earned the right, because some people can position it that way, creating an us versus them mentality. So when thinking about who you want to be vulnerable with, as I mentioned, you're looking at who has earned the right to your story. In the name of adding reciprocity to that, ask yourself not only who has earned the right to hear your story, but also how do you earn the right to hear other people's stories? It makes you intentional with your outreach and starting the whole process of vulnerability, because vulnerability starts with you. And this is something a lot of women miss. You can't expect those closest to you to be vulnerable if you're not willing to go first. But you also can't pour into empty wells. So it's both. Choose people who have shown they can and will pour back. They may not do it perfectly every time, but they've demonstrated in some consistent way that mutual intention to pull back too. So right now, think of 3 people who have earned it. I recommend thinking of more than one person, because something a lot of people do is they put all their emotional needs and expectations onto one single person. But the art of this strategy is to have different people for different types of support. And this is healthy and wise. As you're thinking of these 3 people, ask yourself, have they shown that they can handle your real stuff without judgment and without making it about them? Ask yourself, who has shown that they can keep confidences? Who shares back when you share with them? Who has demonstrated the emotional capacity to sit with your feelings instead of either showing they're uncomfortable with emotions in some way or rushing to make you feel better all the time? And how do you do the same things for them? If you don't do all of these things for them, when can you start? Having a plan for who to be vulnerable with isn't calculating, it's wise. When you know who your safe people are, you can relax into being real with them instead of constantly assessing whether it's okay and having to overthink if you can trust them. And also, it gives you the opportunity to just start practicing vulnerability in a safe relational dynamic. So you know why you want to be vulnerable with people closest to you, and you know who those people are. The next thing is to establish the realistic parameters around vulnerability and the important parameters. Before you can be vulnerable well, you need to understand 3 things about yourself and others, some of which I've already alluded to. The first thing is to manage your expectations of humans. Here's something we just need to accept, guys. Everyone will let you down at some point in some way to varying degrees. And it's not always because they have bad intentions, but because they're human. We all have limited emotional bandwidth. We all use mental shortcuts, and we all react badly sometimes instead of responding thoughtfully. This isn't me telling you to expect the worst. It's me saying expect humanity. Your job isn't to find perfect people. They don't exist. Your job is to know where your boundaries are and why you have them, and then communicate them well when those boundaries are crossed, and have a plan for what you'll do if someone consistently crosses them. Get honest about and become aware of your own limitations too, because you will have them. So besides expecting humanity and making room and allowance for people's mistakes and flaws, the next thing that's important to figure out before you embark on this is when someone lets you down with how they respond to your vulnerability. Is it really about them? Or is it touching an old wound, an unhealed rejection perhaps, or an unspoken need that you never actually communicated? It's good to get clear on these things so you can be prepared going into vulnerable experiences. Knowing your triggers and how and why you perceive things the way you do helps you separate past pain from present reality. It also helps you communicate what you really need when you're being vulnerable. Lastly, recognize your default responses. Because you've been the strong one for so long now, so much so that you might not even recognize when you're shutting people out. You probably don't even realize it anymore. But awareness is that first step to change. Become aware of what are your go-to phrases when you're guarding. Some examples are, I'm fine, or it's all good, don't worry about me. These are some common phrases we can say or use when we're being guarded. Remember what I said, you can't receive vulnerability if you can't create space for it. And you create space by becoming aware of how you're either cultivating it or blocking it. So you know why, who, and the parameters that you're working with, including your own awareness of your triggers and your needs. The fourth thing is to create your vulnerability guidelines. So think of this as what you're comfortable talking about at different levels of relationship. And it's so important this is established beforehand. Some topics you might be fine for coffee with acquaintances. Other topics you may feel they should be reserved for your closest people. And some things maybe you're still figuring out how, when, why, and with whom to share it with. I've got a framework for you to help you establish this. So I am comfortable sharing X with X. So that could be, for instance, I am comfortable sharing work stress with my sister. Or perhaps I am comfortable sharing parenting struggles with a particular friend. I need more time before sharing X with X. So that could be perhaps marriage issues where you're still establishing who's best to share this with. And then lastly, X remains private for now with X. So that could be a particular topic that for now you want it to be private with colleagues, or it could be your parents or certain friends, for instance. Some things may always stay private with certain groups. This matters because when you have clear guidelines, vulnerability becomes a choice and not an accident or something that other people can pressure you into doing. You're not oversharing because someone pushed you, but you're also not undersharing because you're scared. You're making conscious decisions about what to reveal and when. So far, we've covered the foundation, who you'll be vulnerable with, why you want to be vulnerable, what your parameters are, and how you'll manage your boundaries. The last piece, actually doing it. And this is about practicing with micro steps, or what's called titrated vulnerability. And we've got to move towards actually doing this, because every time you handle everything alone, you're robbing others of the gift of supporting you. But changing this pattern, it's not going to happen overnight. That's why I said, let's take baby steps and micro steps. And there's a concept I want to use to help you do this and also understand it. It comes from two psychologists, Altman and Taylor, who perfectly depict this in their social penetration theory. and it explains how relationships deepen. They compare it to peeling an onion, layer by layer. You don't jump from discussing the weather to sharing your deepest fears. There are some unique scenarios where two people are able to do this, or there are some people who naturally do that, right? But the important thing is that if we do that, it's done in a way that builds genuine connection, not just something that's shallow and momentary. Based on their social penetration theory, there are 4 levels of communication for deepening relationships. The first is level 1, and that's surface mode. You're covering facts. You're engaging in small talk and surface information like the weather or what you got up to today. Level 2 is about testing ground. So you're sharing views here, not your vulnerabilities. You're talking about what you think about things, maybe sharing mild preferences. You're talking about your opinions here. Level 3 is the real talk level. That's where actual feelings enter the chat. You're more personal here. So you're sharing what you feel, but not necessarily why you feel it. And level 4 is the unfiltered you. This is the place of full openness, full disclosure. You're sharing your deepest needs, dreams, and your why behind all of them. People really see who you are here. And the thing is that we often expect deep connections while staying at level 1. Or someone demands level 4 vulnerability from you when they've only ever given you level 1, which is the small talk and the facts and the weather talk. But trust just doesn't build that way. Another way these levels can play out is we can wonder why we feel unseen, why we feel unsupported, and why we haven't built the deep bonds that we desire. But yet we've only ever gone as far as level 2 with people. Or some people rush to level 4, only to find out the other person isn't even safe for sharing the level 2 opinions and facts that I mentioned, which in today's world does happen quite frequently. So imagine rushing to level 4 only to find out that you can't even share your level 2 opinions with the person. Some people rush to level 4 communication, but that doesn't mean that trust has been built. So a quick question for you is, where does your level of vulnerability normally stop at? Is it level 1 with surface talk? Do you spend most of your time interacting with people at that level? Or do you make it to level 2 or 3? Let me know in the comments. To begin cultivating level 4, the kind of interactions in your life that build genuine connection, you can start with these micro vulnerabilities. So think of it as conducting small strategic experiments in connection. So some of the experiments could look like this. When someone asks you how you are, pause before saying fine. Remember, I spoke about identifying your relational defaults and how you tend to automatically respond. So if it's I'm fine, pause for a moment before you say that so you can avoid generic responses like I'm fine, I'm good, and see it as a chance to actually give more. Remind yourself that you want to avoid generic answers like that keep you at level 1. You only need to increase your vulnerability by a small percentage each time. So as long as you're saying something more than fine or I'm good, you've made progress. Try sharing one actual feeling instead of just I'm fine. Another small experiment you could make is to ask for a small help. It could be asking someone to pick food up on the way home, for instance, instead of doing all the shopping yourself. A third way is to ask for an emotional support you need, even if it's just a hug. And you could also try admitting one thing you don't know in a conversation. Now, these might seem tiny, but their practice runs for a bigger vulnerability. Like I said, it's all about jumping from level 1, where you're a closed book, to level 4, where you're an open book. Before any vulnerable conversation, don't forget to do a quick check around what we discussed in 2, which is who do you want to be vulnerable with? Remember, I went through a few things. I said, has this person kept confidences before? How have they handled your emotions in the past? And to reiterate, this isn't about finding perfect people, but it is about being wise as you start to build this. Throughout this video, I've asked you to think about several things. The 3 most important, though, are why do you want to be vulnerable? What are you actually seeking from deeper connection? The second is, who are your 3 safe people? The ones who have earned the right to hear your story, and how are you earning the right to hear theirs? And the last one is, what's one micro vulnerability that you'll try this week? Pick one that you'll think about this week and share in the comments what you decide. I wish we lived in a world where vulnerability was always safe with everyone, where where no one weaponized your openness against you, and where every person honored what you shared. We don't live in that world. But this doesn't mean you should miss out on the joy and love that comes from being seen and seeing others, or the physical relief that comes when someone truly gets you. You have spent years perfecting the art of achievement. Now it's time to master the art of connecting intimately. Because at the end of your life, you won't be consumed with thoughts about that spectacular presentation you created for work. You'll remember the moments, those special moments you had when someone saw the real you and loved you anyway. You'll remember the times you let your guard down and found support instead of judgment. And you'll remember the people that did that for you. That's what smart vulnerability gives you. The ability to create those moments intentionally, wisely, and without losing yourself in the process. Thank you for being here with me today, folks. I'm Louise. I'm an accredited coach, business psychologist, and consultant. My mission is to help you untie your self-worth from your achievements so you can build authentic connections and have a personal life that matches your professional success. And if you want to understand why traditional vulnerability sets strong women up to fail, then I recommend you watch part 1. In the meantime, keep mastering what matters most.